Hello and welcome to What the F Just Happened Today, your essential guide to the daily shock and awe in national politics. I'm Joe Amditas. Let's get to it. It's Wednesday, October 6th, 2021. Welcome to day 260. The Senate postponed a vote to suspend the nation's debt limit after Republicans plan to filibuster the effort for the third time in just 2 weeks. Mitch McConnell and Republican lawmakers continue to block debate on the legislation as part of their opposition to Biden's economic agenda, arguing that Democrats should raise the debt limit unilaterally through reconciliation. Democrats, however, have repeatedly said that reconciliation is not an option since it would be too complicated, time-consuming, and risky given the threat of a first-ever default on federal debt. Democrats need at least 10 Republicans to join them to break a filibuster in the Senate when it comes to raising the debt limit. Chuck Schumer has said that he wants Congress to pass legislation on the debt ceiling by the end of the week. Biden, meanwhile, suggested that it's a real possibility that Democrats would revise the Senate's filibuster rules in order to overcome Republican blockades on raising the debt ceiling. To invoke the so-called nuclear option and change the filibuster rules, Democrats would need unity from their 50-member caucus, including Harris's tie-breaking vote. Democrats said any carve-out for the debt limit would apply only to the debt limit and not other measures. Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, however, remain opposed to changing the Senate's filibuster rules. Manchin called any speculation that he would support changing the rules theatrics, but added, "We are not going to default as a country." Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, meanwhile, warned that October 18th is the deadline before the United States will be, quote, out of extraordinary measures, have limited cash, and likely to exhaust it very quickly, end quote. She added that a default could plunge the United States into a recession. Back in Congress, Mitch McConnell offered to allow Democrats to temporarily raise the debt ceiling, but refused to lift the GOP blockade of the long-term increase. In a statement, McConnell said Republicans would let Democrats lift the debt ceiling through November to a fixed number, rather than simply suspending the debt limit until a set date, which would give Democrats more time to pass debt limit legislation through reconciliation without any Republican votes. This will moot Democrats' excuses about the time crunch, McConnell said in a statement. Senate Democrats signaled that they would accept McConnell's offer, setting up a vote as soon as this week on the short-term debt patch. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki responded to McConnell's proposal saying, "We could get this done today. We don't need to kick the can. We don't need to go through a cumbersome process that every day brings additional risks." Moving on, Florida is the only state that has yet to submit a plan to the Education Department for how it will use federal COVID-19 relief funding for its schools. The state's plan is required to be submitted before the more than $2.3 billion in federal aid can be released to Florida's schools. The Biden administration ordered Arizona, meanwhile, to stop using federal pandemic funding on a pair of grant programs that were only available to schools that didn't have mask mandates. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's top aides are expected to defy demands for documents and testimony coming from the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. The committee had issued subpoenas to Mark Meadows, Steve Bannon, Dan Scavino, and Kash Patel, requesting documents by October 7th and a deposition by October 15th. Trump and his legal team, however, have pressed the attorneys for the subpoenaed aides to defy the orders. The committee has also reportedly been unable to physically serve the subpoena to Dan Scavino. In the courts, a federal judge sentenced one of the January 6 rioters to 45 days in jail, as well as 60 hours of community service and a $500 restitution for the damage done to the Capitol building. Matthew Mazzoco's defense attorney had asked for probation, while a federal prosecutor has suggested 3 months of home confinement. Instead, during Mazzoco's sentencing, U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkin said that if the defendant walks away with probation and a slap on the wrist, that's not going to deter anyone from trying what he did again. She added, "The country is watching." Of the 11 defendants who were sentenced so far, Mazzocco is the first to receive a jail term when prosecutors had not specifically asked for one. And finally, Trump praised Mike Pence for downplaying the January 6 Capitol riot, saying that Pence's Fox News interview, quote, very much destroys and discredits the Unselect Committee's witch hunt, end quote, which is investigating the insurrection. During his interview with Sean Hannity, Pence blamed the media for distracting from Biden's failed agenda by focusing on one day in January, adding that they want to use that one day to try and demean the character and intentions of 74 million Americans. A bipartisan group of former officials and former federal judges, meanwhile, asked the California Bar Association to investigate the conduct of John Eastman, the attorney who outlined the legal strategy for Pence to overturn the 2020 election results by simply not counting electoral votes on January 6th. And in the polls, Pew Research Center says 67% of Republicans say Trump should remain a major national political figure, including 44% who said they'd like him to run for president again in 2024. 32% say they don't want Trump to remain a national political figure. And Quinnipiac says 38% of Americans now approve of the job Joe Biden is doing as president, his lowest approval rating since taking office. 53% disapprove. That's all for now. You can find the links and sources for all of these stories on the main website. And as always, visit whatthefjusthappenedtoday.com for the latest news and headlines. Until next time, I'm Joe Amditas.